Okay, so we talked about the general context in which the the chaos in Afghanistan's happened, what set it up over the last 20 years. We talked about what was the failings in trying to nation build there. Let's talk about the failings of Afghanistan, of the Afghanis, and the other blame. And my other blame, and I have posted this, I've thrown this idea out online and worked with it a little bit there. And the other one, I wish I could remember exactly who said it. It was one of the conservative, it wasn't Rush Limbaugh, but it was one of the conservative talk show type pundits was out there, pointed out years ago. I think it actually was pointed out in one of the mass migrations into Europe, um, from Middle Easterners, and I don't remember exactly which one it was. And and they said the the problem for them is, he pointed out that the problem is that the people, that most of the people who were migrating to Sweden and places like that were the young men. And the problem with that is they shouldn't be migrating. They should be at home fighting for a country of their own. They are who nation build. They are who makes your country. Their freedom comes primarily from young men. That is who has established freedom in the world. And it's interesting because we tend to think of the great generals and so forth. It's one of my pet peeves, even as somebody who collects war books and reads war books like crazy. And my favorite series is the Sharp series, and it's Richard Sharp, and he's a British soldier in the Napoleonic Wars. And one of my pet peeves as a sergeant is that those books are always about officers. And officers don't win wars. They don't. They're decision makers. But NCOs run the army. So the enlisted guy wins wars. What do I mean by that? It's the average guy is willing to kill and die. That's what makes the decision. And that's what we saw, the most major failing we saw in the collapse of Afghanistan, in the physical sense of why is the Taliban take control. And it's because the Afghani male, the 18 to 40-year-old male, ran away from the fight. When it was their time to step up for the future, they left. They did not stand up for it at all. They didn't. They laid it down and ran away. And we had plenty of idea it was coming. Oh, by the way, if you start digging into the news deeper, you're going to find, we act like the Afghani army ran away a few days ago. They didn't. They've been running away for months. They've been disappearing in entire units. Oh, by the way, the scary one is they didn't just lay down their guns and run away. They very often packed their shit up and went over and became Taliban. They just joined the other side. With our shit, by the way. The Taliban's largely supplied by the United States taxpayer. And at some point we have to fail them. We have to say, if you're going to have a future, you have to actually want it. Okay? So the failing is both on them and on us. I said in the last one that we didn't help them find a future. On the other hand, they have to find it for themselves too. That the Revolutionary War was not won by George Washington. The Revolutionary War was won by guys in Valley Forge who'd been horrendously let down by their country. That the John Adams and the Thomas Jeffersons and the George Washingtons had called them to something greater, that they could have this land and they could take it, and they'd followed. And then it was December and there's snow on the ground, and it's freezing rain and snow and miserable like there is no end. And these guys are barefoot. They have nothing. and enough of them didn't leave. That's what gives you control of your future destiny. That's what gives you the ability to dream for yourself. Is at some point the individuals believe in it in a way that the war is won by a guy who doesn't run away in the face of that. And that there seem to be almost no stories of that out of Afghanistan. There seem to be almost no stories of the guy who says, screw it all, I'm not leaving. I'm not following all of you. I believe in our future. I'm staying. Because there are enough true stories out there of units turning around and coming to the defense of that one. And very often the one is not the general or because, and we talk about Afghanistan has been rife with corruption and the wrong peoples being put in power because they can line their pockets and all of those sorts of things. And world history is filled with heroes that didn't fall for that. That it didn't matter. Those were not the people who changed the world. The people who changed the world was the individual guy who says, not on my watch, not. And there's a real question about whether or not you can give a modern country to a generation of people who won't do that. That if you look at Japan and Germany in World War II did not suffer of that. That be it whatever, be it how much we hate what happened and how the wars were fought and all those sorts of things, their people were heroes too, in the sense that they would stand and fight in the terrible conditions and they would keep going and against all odds and all those sorts of things. It was going to be, whatever side won was going to be made up of people who are willing to kill and die for whatever the outcome was. And right now, it appears in Afghanistan, the only group of people who are willing to kill and die for it are the evil, motivated individuals. They're willing to sacrifice, or they're willing to put their lives on the line. Now, don't get me wrong, I said that there were no examples. I've seen one so far. I've seen a group of women standing up to a Taliban person and protesting in the face of a Taliban person. I've seen one of those. And you might ask, it would be fair for you to say it's a sexist thing for me to say it's on the men. And it is a sexist thing. I'll admit that. Okay? But the wars are fought by young men. Are there women capable of fighting well in a war? Yes, there are. There's no doubt about it. The thing is I think they are, if you were to take all women, which ones are built in a way that make them good at war? I think that's a much smaller piece of the total than of all of men, which ones are good at doing what it takes to wage a war. That's a much larger piece. Why? I think we're designed that way. I think we are physically different. I think we're mentally different. I think that, and honestly, I thank God we are. Why? The classic examples are things like men do most of the hunting and have primarily done most of the hunting. Why? Well, because I pull the trigger on the deer, I don't think about Bambi and Bambi's mom and all of that. And as a matter of fact, I don't think about the food or anything. It is a very primal thing to kill, and it is. I'm sorry, it's part of our makeup of what we are. And I think it's more made up of among men because that's what we were created to be. Oh, by the way, it's a good thing it's there. Why? I think it shows in parenting. I remember, and it's been coming up because of my grandkids. My wife and I have this major difference in how our grandchildren and how our children learn. What is the thing that they're learning? They're learning about basic physics. That when you stand on shit, if you're not careful, you fall down, and falling down hurts. And I think I have the quintessential man's way of doing it, which is stay out of their way and let them fall down and get hurt. I don't want them to die, so I remove the really sharp crap and the hardest stuff, but I don't remove everything, and I don't surround them with pillows. Why? Because they won't learn anything. If you surround them with pillows, then falling off of stuff, they find falling off becomes fun. So my grandson, my daughter bought him a small toy box, and Christopher immediately took to standing on it. And when he'd stand on it, my wife's like, ha, ha, ha. She would go over and like, no, get out of the way. Let him fall down and hurt himself, because the only way he doesn't understand the motivation. It's not very tall, and he's not going to get hurt very bad. He's not going to break things. Children are designed to learn those lessons. They are very resilient. The amount of weight they have means that when they fall over those distances, a 60-year-old, probably 50. I'm 50. I fall off the table, the camera's on right here, and catch myself with my arms. I'd say there's a reasonable chance I break something. If I don't break something, I certainly strain something, and I'm in bed for a week. My grandson falls off there. He cries because he scared himself, and maybe he gets a bump or something, but that's it. And he's back on. And, oh, by the way, he doesn't even learn the first time. He's got to do it multiple times. And I think parenting's designed to have both. That then when he falls down and he cries, the women want to scoop them up and make sure that they know that they're okay, and that's not how all of the world is, and that's all important. And I want to stay out of the way and say, well, rub some dirt on it. It's this sense. And I realize these are big generalities. Okay, I have known women who could outfight most anybody I know. I've known women who I believe could pull a trigger as easy as a man could, and those sorts of things. It doesn't work in the individual, it works in the generality. But in the generality, there are some other things about it too, and that is that if you send your women off to fight, you destroy your population. Plain and simple, the way the basic biology works, you can rebuild a population. If you have all of the women and a few of the men, you're just fine. You have a few happy men and you rebuild a whole population. And if you do it the other way around, you can't. You can only have babies so quickly. And so because of that, the basic biology says you go to war with your men, not with your women. It doesn't make sense the other way around. It doesn't. If you were to have killed as many women in World War II or the Revolutionary War or the Civil War as you killed the men, population would still not have recovered. You can't do that. That's not how it is. And so freedom is brought about primarily by the young men and the motivations that build them up to make them willing to kill and die. And right now, at least within the things we've seen in the Middle East, we're not seeing the young men willing to fight and die to control their own destinies there. I've said in the last video about why I think some of those things are, if they have no future, if they have no, but I think the opposite could be there too. I think they could decide, let's get control of the question. Let's get the right to decide, and then we'll do it. And and so they go out there. They could go out there and wipe out the Taliban. They absolutely had the power. They were better trained. They were better equipped. They absolutely had the physical power to fight the Taliban. What they didn't have was the individual will. At the end of it all, the individuals have to be willing to do it. And as a soldier, I signed up for that. It's an interesting thing. I speak from the experience of deciding I would put myself forward to be one of the people to go do that. And it's an interesting thing because it's part of it's an individualized thing, and you're part of a group. You're signing up to let other people decide what the thing you go fight is. You get, was Iraq, Afghanistan, was it worth it? Was it, are you proud of what you did there? I signed up to not get to decide. I signed up to be ready to go. I became a weapon as part of the system. Am I proud of what I did? Yes, I am. That when they asked me to do my piece, I went and did my piece. I did what they told me to do. Why? Because sometimes you get to be the guys who fought in World War II or the guys who fought in the Revolutionary War, and you go down as history as the heroes for all times. And sometimes you fight in Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan or Bosnia or the Bay of Pigs and it's messy, but soldiers go when they're called. That's what it is. And history doesn't write those guys as heroes the same. And really that's bullshit. because very often the whether or not it was worth it is written way later. Okay? Sometimes it's written in the time. Sometimes it's usually the hero of the right then is often written in, it can be written in the guy who says no. The guy whose job it is to put Jews on a train and says no. Okay, that's a hero of right then. Was he on the winning side or not? That's going to be written way later. But the people asked me when I was serving and when we were deployed to Iraq, and people would ask me, is it worth it, or all those sorts of things, and what do you think's going to... There was lots of discussions, and I said, what do I hope? My hope is that 70 years later we'd be looking at Iraq and Afghanistan the way we look at Germany and Japan, and say, and people would be surprised anybody ever said they couldn't have peace, and any of those sorts of things. That's what I hoped. I hoped that we would be writing the end of war among two of the most warrior nations in the history of the world. I was hoping we'd do that. Afghanistan, that's not looking like that. But if 70 years from now we were looking back at a economically successful, world stable Afghanistan, we'd all be fucking heroes for standing and doing it, all of that. And the thing is the individual guy on the ground, it wasn't up to them. It was we don't make those decisions. But when the fight comes, you have to decide if you're going to stand or you're going to run away. And yes, I fault the Iraqi or the Afghani military members who set their guns down and ran away. Fuck them. We gave them 20 years of a chance of becoming something. And we trained them, and we equipped them, and we paid them, and they had everything it took for them to keep their country. I'll have trouble with some of the decisions of whether or not we should have seen this coming and whether or not but it still comes down to it. Shame on you guys. Shame on you, and whatever happens to you is on you. Screw you. I'm sorry. You are not men. You're not. You're chicken shits who ran away. You signed up for something, you took the training, you took the weapon, and you ran away. And I don't respect that. And in a greater sense, Afghanistan has and will get what they deserve. Because nobody's decided to do right there. They haven't. And I think, we can't force them to do the right thing. That's harsh, and I realize it's harsh. But when it comes down to we couldn't, they had the opportunity. They absolutely had the opportunity, and they could have stopped the Taliban. And whether or not they were ever going to, and whether or not we talked them into it, and I think some of this is where were the great speeches from their leaders? Their president ran away. Where was he in the last 6 months prepping them to stand? Where's William Wallace? Where is they making their stand? And none of that was there. But it wasn't there among the individuals either. Maybe that they go hand in hand. I don't know. But when it comes down to it, if is yeah, and I keep looking for him. The great failed moments in history. Tiananmen Square is one of the great failed moments in history. Why? Because Tiananmen Square is the moment of a totalitarian regime crushing the dissent. And there were heroes that stood up there. Tank Man, everybody knows who Tank Man is. The individual guy who stood out in front of the tank. Tank Man was the guy who gave them a chance. Tank Man told you it was possible. And the Chinese don't have individual freedom and liberty because Tank Man was alone. Wasn't entirely alone, but among a population of 1 billion people, they could crush the damn communists overnight. And the communists, the reason they don't have freedom of their internet and all that shit is because the dictator leaders of the Communist Party know they are deathly afraid of the people all the time. Their army, no matter how well equipped, even with nuclear weapons, could not win a war against their own damn people if their people just stood up as Tank Man and stood in front of tanks. Eventually, you can't run them all over. You just can't do it. That's what it was going to take. And unfortunately, the rest of nobody had his back. Nobody had his back. They just ran them over, but they didn't. But they ran over everybody who stayed, and everybody else ran away. And no, if 100 million people stand up and won't leave, no matter what happens, they win that. And so so the Chinese could have done it. Well, this was the moment. This was the moment in Afghanistan, and they decided. The men of Afghanistan decided being a third world hellhole is what they are going to continue to be for the foreseeable future. And so that's where they are. That's what happened.